supposed to get this camera?
Knowing Andrew or Andy since James was about 5 or 6, all brings honors that may have had a tough time finding a place on your everyday label. Sounds including noise,
Perfect.
soundscape, recoil, mashup, and many more found a home in Volume vs. Mass Test Records between collectible outside of the United Kingdom. Some noteworthy releases in the earlier discography include 1998's Split Series number 1, a 12-inch that retailed both band-oriented and
Yeah, I couldn't go to sleep.
and 1999's Pig, which was simply just the sounds of pigs feeding at Kirby's uncle's farm
Yeah.
in the
So I
Northwest.
kind of
Many
been
reviewers
up for a
mistake
little
the
bit, just
sound
gonna
of pigs for that
live
of
stream and play this.
Volume vs. Mass was pretty successful in its own right. Many may even note
Listen to this video while I'm working on this.
success today throughout the internet, but as Volume vs. Mass, Kirby had a single of the week on British music magazine NME, the Musical Express, as well as loads of other press at the time from doing tons of chaotic shows with and without Andy. In 2006, we would see the most popularized Volume vs. Mass release, The Death of Raid. And look, if you think Everywhere at the End of Time is long, take a step back there, my friend, because if you were tracked in 2014, 8 tracks off of the original Death of Raid were remastered and packaged under the name The Death of Raid, a partial flashback. Doing this allowed the listener to experience the project in a way more integral manner. Its use was clearly created into a far shorter runtime. And while the act of listening to all of the original The Death of Raid was meant to be off-putting and hard to tackle in the first place, the 2014 rework is a solid way for those looking to experience Kirby's feelings on the death of the two they've seen in a far shorter span of time. Of course, The Death of Raid was vast, too vast to digest, and so 8 tracks were lifted from the project and have now been remastered by Matt Colton as a document from a dead past, a monument to their lost work, an idea finally set in stone via a physical format, proof of its existence. In 1997, we would be introduced to James Dean Kirby's The Stranger moniker with the release of the same name. Over 10 years later, Kirby would return to The Stranger with Blue Glow in 2008, and then Watching Dead Empires in Decay in 2013. We see a more brooding and atmospheric side of Kirby with The Stranger, compared to his more popular releases under The Caretaker. While The Caretaker moves from delicate bliss to a distorted collapse, all compressed through the specific and personal narrative you create for those releases in your mind, The Stranger embodies something a bit more grand and cinematic. Instead of feeling like you're sitting in your grandparents' living room with something like Everywhere at the End of Time, The Stranger brings us to an abandoned alleyway in an endless description into the black and white. I find the artwork of Watching Dead Empires in Decay to be the perfect screenshot to not see what The Stranger would sound like, but where The Stranger would deteriorating apartment complexes with families stuck inside where he did much better. While looking under his discography as he runs as himself, we see some absolute classics that have also gained some serious recognition online in this day and age. Some personal favorites of mine include Eagles of Stars from 2011, such as Cosmic Experience, the Eagles float in the dead of space, and even though space is a vacuum and you can't hear sound, Kirby somehow makes it possible. Another big release, which I also covered in the previous video on this channel, We So Tired of All the Darkness in the World, came out just 6 years later, which uses sharp strings, lonely pianos, and constant synths, ranging from all things ambient to sound-like techno. Kirby's production in these releases become beautifully layered, diverse compositions that almost feel like the last person in the universe, trapped in a musty room, with nothing but a window separating us from the rainy day outside. These tracks are arrestingly clear-headed and somber. How you decipher the meaning of these moods and atmospheres is where the beauty and longevity of these pieces lie, as patience and repeated listen can reveal new views of the landscape as the seasons change. After the conclusion of Volume vs. Mass Test Records, a new label project from Kirby would spawn in 2009. History always favors the winners, which, like, come on, that is the coolest name for a label, straight up. The label now houses all of the works of Kirby, from The Stranger to The Caretaker, as he now resides in Krakow, Poland. While the main focus of this video is obviously Kirby's work as The Caretaker, I find many people crave something else after they finish something as gargantuan as Everywhere at the End of Time. If you are one of those people, or you are just someone who is looking to dive into something new and chilling, make sure you check out some of these other works from Kirby. There is a massive, I mean like massive amount of audio to go through that will have you busy for weeks to come. I promise you it is definitely worth your time. With all of that being said, let's begin visiting our old little friend, the caretaker.
So the first time I really became aware of the caretaker, it was actually since Tech was really into reading the music blogs and staying on top of stuff at that time, and he had read about this album 20 mixtapes, and he played for me long-term remote from the album Persistent Repetition of Phases, and it was just like, it's almost like proto New World or whatever, because it was just this perfect chord progression, just like the most emotive part of a song that Leland Kirby had sort of sniffed and just looped ad nauseum, like music concrete, and just drenched in reverb, and it was just so indulgent. Um, and when it first started, I remember just thinking like, oh my god, what is this track? And then Tech's like, oh yeah, like you're really gonna love this because it's just the same thing, but it's only been for like 5 minutes. And it's like, holy shit, who is this?
The deterioration of the mind is a subject James Leland Kirby traverses through with the caretaker, using sound to portray the destruction of memory or the worsening symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's as it slowly but surely consumes the entirety of a person. It's a process that doesn't happen overnight, and Kirby demonstrates the ruthlessness of the disease by stealthily corrupting the audio throughout an album's runtime. One moment you're frolicking in memories of the past, and the next moment you're wondering when did everything get so grim. It feels like only 2 minutes have passed, yet you look down at the time and you realize you've been listening to one of his creations for over 40 minutes already. There are over a dozen interviews, way more than that actually, with James Leland Kirby you can visit throughout the web. Many of these are incredibly lengthy and are amazing ways to take a look at Kirby's methods straight from, James Leland Kirby. With all of this material available, exploring James's intentions as a musician and how he arrives at his finished product would take hours, maybe even days, if we were to literally explore all of the research and findings gathered by the Caretaker fan base and community over the years. To sum it all up, the significance in Kirby's production as the Caretaker comes down to this incredible ability to lull us into submission and doom. A musical Venus flytrap. You'll know this firsthand if you've ever experienced the work of Kirby under this moniker. Projects, especially Everywhere at the End of Time, are performed with varying intensities of sample manipulation. There are moments where samples are only altered through slight pitch movement, or times when they're peppered with only a bit of reverb. Looping is an obvious mainstay here as well, that ticking trance and unacceptable kick sound. Your deteriorated audio equipment, the enormous crackle of worn out vinyl, and all of these characteristics. These are only the innocent moments, because as we dig deeper, tracks become an audio collage of their former self. Battered and left for dead, sounds begin to pop their heads out with vital breaths of fresh air before being dragged back down into the conflagration of all the other sounds. A frightening feeding frenzy too. The life of the caretaker would span between three different decades. Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom would be the first work Kirby would release under the caretaker alias in September of 1999. Inspired by scenes and settings from the 1980 horror classic The Shining, this would be our first look at Kirby's experimentation and fascination with old 30s sample work as the caretaker. In my emails with Kirby, he states that work for the first Caretaker album actually started in 1997 and was mostly made with no computer at all, just a turntable and some effects. Aged ballroom jazz selections and waltz numbers are warped, bended, and distorted to create a confusing atmosphere, all mixed throughout the album of chilling moans and erratic sounds. Kirby's aesthetic direction present in Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom, despite it it maybe not being as memorable or successful as Everywhere at the End of Time was chilling nonetheless. Initial Caretaker releases got a lot of support from the legendary DJ John Peel, one of the original and longest serving DJs of BBC Radio 1, which helped spark attention to the Caretaker name. Kirby also recalls having a review of selected memories in a Russian Playboy publication for some odd reason.
The project really started as an exploration of sort of terrifying themes that were more based in the supernatural. And I mean, the genre was haunted ballroom music, and it was inspired by that last shot from The Shining, where Jack Torrance, who is the caretaker, of the Overlook Hotel, becomes trapped in the portrait and becomes one of the many, evil spirits that haunt the hotel. But if you watch that scene, you can hear this ballroom music being played, somewhere far away, kind of echoing through the empty halls, and just that sound inspired the entire project.
As the Caretaker moniker continued, it slowly evolved from centering on the setting of ballroom ghosts to decaying memories of a failing brain. We would receive 9 more releases from the Caretaker spanning from 2001 to 2012. But starting in 2016 is where our story play really begins. In September of that year, James would. Wait, hold on 1 second. Am I missing anything super important that we should explore before we finally get into Everywhere at the End of Time?
Good song. I like it.
Look, I'm going to say this to an Kirby release of all time. If you've seen
It
my top
is.
10 favorite albums video, I've placed this album in the honorable mentions section, and when it comes down to it, I just choose to listen to An Empty Bliss Beyond This World far more than I do Everywhere at the End of Time. The way I see it, An Empty Bliss Beyond This World takes all 6+ hours of Everywhere at the End of Time and condenses it into one highly pressurized ball of clay, literally.
Hmm.
At under an hour long, An Empty Bliss is far more practical to listen to, and I
Wow.
don't mean to take anything away from Everywhere at the End of Time, but if you want to truly get the full experience of that project, you really do need to dedicate almost 7 hours of your day to experience Everywhere at the End of Time the way it was supposed to be experienced. And if you're one of those people who really only visit Everywhere at the End of Time for stages 1 and 2, the more blissful and warm areas throughout its runtime, which we will obviously get into later on in this video, An Empty Bliss makes even more sense for your case. It's a beautiful collection of sample reworks piled into 15 tracks, a majority of these tracks glazed in a nature of reminiscing about a jovial past. James discovered the sample material for An Empty Bliss at a record shop in Brooklyn, New York. In his 2011 interview with Vice magazine, James recalls spending about $5 on a selection of 10 or so records in a section of dance band albums he found to be interesting at first glance. They were among some of the cheapest records in the shop, and Kirby was pleasantly surprised to discover they would be the perfect tunes to have some fun with. Amazingly, when I made it back to Berlin, the mood on them all was incredible. Released on May 19th, 2011, An Empty Bliss Beyond This World is easily the runner-up in the race for the most popular and recognized Caretaker release. And as time goes by and more people stumble upon Everywhere at the End of Time, it's amazing to watch the love for this project grow as well due to the thousands of people who discover An Empty Bliss after looking further into the Caretaker discography.
And if you're going to talk about Everywhere at the End of Time, you really have to talk about An Empty Bliss Beyond This World. Um, because that was really kind of, I feel like, the turning point for Lee and Kirby. Because I think that the Caretaker series up to that point had definitely explored these ideas of the mind deteriorating and losing memory and things like that. And it sort of had gotten there from that sort of supernatural beginning, almost as more like, like a simulator more than an actual album or a concept album. And I think that that really kind of hit full pitch with An Empty Bliss Beyond This World. I remember really being struck by how kind of focused um, his telling of that story and his construction of that simulation was. There was just a small pool of melodies that sort of came back as the album progressed, and it was really the concept of Everywhere at the End of Time but in a sort of much smaller package. So as the album progressed, you would hear melodies from the beginning of the album, but maybe just the left channel would be cutting in and out, like a memory engram that's slowly deteriorating and sort of falling away. And that was another album that I sort of just completely just let take over my life. Like just one of those albums, those albums where there's just like a year that the album comes out that you just like you listen to it like 10,000 times and it's always okay. It's always what you want to hear for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe I was in a dark place.
On an empty bliss beyond this world, we feel as if we are ascending the concept of memories entirely. Tracks like I Feel As If I Might Be Vanishing are objectively beautiful, a comforting cloak over the remembrance of good or bad times. Distant foggy horns and hypersensitive leaping strings chug us through a smoky, gunmetal colored ocean. Mental Caverns Without Sunshine has us looking back at the journey of our lives, coughing, tired, and in need of a place to rest as we stand atop that hill, looking at all of the places we have been to throughout our lifetime.
Oh man. Here we go.
I'd like to think of Empty Bliss Beyond This World, even though it came out a couple of years before, as the sequel to Everywhere at the End of Time, in the sense of what we all think of it narratively. The aura of the audio in An Empty Bliss is almost heavenly. It's the location we've all deserved to arrive at after the struggles in Everywhere at the End of Time. It's generally a bright and airy listen, delicate at times and euphoric at others. Some find this album to still feel a bit eerie and whatnot, but I've just never felt that way about it. Sourced from a mysterious collection of 78s, these vague snippets of archaic sonics reflect the ability of Alzheimer's patients to recall the songs of their past, and with them, recollections of places, people, moods, and sensations. This is an old picture of my grandmother, and she was, without a doubt, one of the most beautiful souls I've ever had the honor of knowing. She was kind beyond kind, full of stories always, especially if you made her weep by letting her make you a cup of espresso and staying for a while. Now, my grandmother never had dementia. She passed away from cancer 2 years ago. 2 years to the very date as I began writing the script for this video. Everywhere at the End of Time has this amazing ability to make us remember or miss someone. It's a very personalized experience that can cause you to reflect on something that has happened in your life. The project hits us each in different, unique ways, from those who have been directly impacted by a loved one suffering with Alzheimer's or dementia, to those who just experience this feeling in their gut that they should maybe call their parents and check in on them. Everywhere at the End of Time defies sound. I always notice that something special happens before something drastic happens. It's a tick in time that is always suspiciously sweet. Something out of the ordinary that you never noticed as it was happening. And whenever I look back on those moments, I always say to myself, I wish I was a bit more aware or just picked up on the little things. But I guess that's life anyway. We'll get back to the story a little later. Alrighty, so as I was getting to before we started talking about An Empty Bliss, in September of 2016, Kirby would release stage one of Everywhere at the End of Time, what soon would become his magnum opus. After its final installation of stage six that dropped in 2019, Everywhere at the End of Time.
When Everywhere at the End of Time was first announced and came out, it was like, holy shit, here we go. Like, this is the Caretaker magnum opus. It's, those ideas from An Empty Bliss, but just really blown out um, to an extreme that had never been seen before. And it was great for me, too, because another reason why I've always admired Leland Kirby's work is that he's really willing to indulge himself with these concepts. And, he's never been concerned with accessibility. Um, at all. And I think that the length of his albums is another way that he sort of leans in on that. I mean, that's the reason why I made Dare Like Mega Tower was originally inspired by the fact that, Leland Kirby had made an album that was just shy of 4 hours. And I wanted to beat that, so that was something that kind of inspired me personally. And so I think that everywhere at the end of time is really kind of the final punctuation of that sort of um, just unwilling to restrain himself.
In a nutshell, the project features some of the most riveting sample lists you can find, period. The vitality in these weathered sounding relics from George Olson, Chester Gaylord, Leighton Johnstone, William King, and a plethora of other artists sampled by the caretaker who, when listening to the sound quality of their music today, reminds you of the contents in your grandparents' closets, wrinkled leather jackets and yellow pillow covers somehow brought to life in audio form. As most of you probably know already, samples are the name of the game, and everywhere at the end of time. And something to look out for is the repurposing of those samples throughout the entirety of the project. It's fascinating when you notice sounds you swore you heard in stages 1 or 2 reappear in a future time on the album, like the muted trumpet in the intro portion of J1 Postal Wellness Confusions, coming from the same artist sampled in Into Each Other's Eyes, Horace Winnick. And the reappearance of samples aren't just limited to the confines of Everywhere at the End of Time. This is an expansive universe, and Kirby makes that well known by sneaking in samples used from previous Caretaker releases. The callbacks to past albums in Everywhere at the End of Time, while it's far more noticeable in Stage 3, are present in every stage. A good example of this would be Stage 1's All That Follows Is True, being a less distorted version of Under a Warm Golden Light from 2008's We'll All Go Riding on a Rainbow. Or how about the sample used in Childishly Fresh Eyes, which comes from the same Russ Morgan record as the sample used in Camaraderie at Arm's Length on An Empty Bliss? What makes the repurposing of samples so much fun, in a way, I know that using the word fun might sound kind of wacky here, is that you find yourself trying to decide if you've actually heard the sound earlier in the project or not. Sounds may feel familiar, but due to the massive length of the project, it's so easy to become lost in the audio, unsure if this sound actually happened before or if it's your mind just playing tricks on you. It's a really interesting sensation and a lesser discussed characteristic of Everywhere at the End of Time that I find adds to the overall theme of the project tremendously. Stage 1 of Everywhere at the End of Time starts off jovial and nostalgic, with Kirby presenting happy memories in the foreground, even though very early on we can already sense he's got something up his sleeve. Kirby does this by knitting the samples together with innocent cracks, delicate pops, and, to put it lightly, a healthy dosage of reverb poured over the entire Sunday. Unfortunately, once Everywhere at the End of Time gets going into stages 2, 3, and so on, the memories begin to strip away like wooden shingles in a storm. Kirby brilliantly injects the downfall of the music into our ears like an IV. A slow drip, all simulating the rotting of the mind once under the clutches of Alzheimer's. James's dedication to dissension must be applauded. His ability to make you feel like you're watching the life of your grandparents through an old tube television is breathtaking. A program broadcasting the happiest moments of your youth all the way to the final breath of their life. The project's six-part series was released throughout a period of 3 years, with each stage being released 6 months apart from each other to simulate the progression progress through each stage, we begin to see the artwork decay along the way, becoming less concrete and more abstract, until we hit that last stage where we're given nothing but what is believed to be the back of an art piece or a canvas with the tape that once held it up on a wall. Artwork is such an important part of the listening experience, at least in my opinion. I know many of you kind of like to go into music without any context or anything like that, but I think the use of artwork and having colors to relate to, for example, creates an incredible narrative and opportunity for imagination. It creates moods, smells, tastes, and the occasional deja vu. Even if none of us are actually in our old age and suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, this duo of Kirby and Seal is really the perfect combo. A pairing of artwork and music that evolves the intended moods and uncanny undertones throughout many of Kirby's works. The two go back over 20 years, with Seal even appearing on one of the early Volume versus Mass compilations, and both have found a way to bounce off of one another perfectly.
Hi, my name is Justin Morton. I'm a digital illustrator, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Ivan Steele's art. It's one thing to paint what you see, but to paint how something feels is a different beast altogether. And that's what Ivan does so well. He breaks subjects down to their pure feelings with his use of color, texture, and spatial placement. His paintings pull me in, even if the subject matter has become so abstract that it's lost forever, only to be a concept of a feeling or memory. That's really the beauty of Ivan Steele's work. I believe Ivan's work complements the caretakers perfectly. The way Ivan deconstructs and distorts our memories into a facade of something we thought we once knew. The music and the art truly just go hand in hand.
Like I said earlier in this video, there are way too many video essays out there that do a solid job at exploring everywhere at the end of time. But one video in particular that presents the beauty in this connection between the music of Kirby and the artwork of Seal is this video right here by the YouTuber A Bucket of Jake. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below for those who want to explore that artwork aspect a little bit more.
What's up, y'all? It's me, the caretaker man, Jake Joseph, also known on the internet as the Bucket of Jake. If you've heard my name before, chances are you've seen my video dissecting the album Tad is currently talking about, The Caretaker's Everywhere at the End of Time. The album is, for lack of a better phrase, a monster in every way imaginable, in length, in lore, in art, and in subject matter. Creating my original Caretaker video was a feat in itself. I think the album Everywhere at the End of Time is such an anomaly because even though the subject matter is quite uniform with the themes of a dementia patient, everyone experiences it differently. My reaction could be different from Pat's, whose could be different from yours, whose could be different from your friends, whose could be different from their dogs, and so on and so on. I have to say, I think James William Kirby is finally getting the deserved light shown on his work, with it now creeping into pop culture with shitty Instagram memes and shitty TikTok challenges. It's a TikTok challenge. What? This is a very important outcome from this. All the best luck to you, man.
Now that we have a solid foundation for what the whole project is all about on the surface level, I want to explore each stage with you individually. Standing in front of Everywhere at the End of Time can seem like you're facing a real behemoth of work. But when breaking down each stage for what it is, it almost feels like you're experiencing six different films that seemingly blend into one another instead of this gigantic feast. Let's dive in. Stage 1. Here we experience the first signs of memory loss. This stage is most like a beautiful daydream, the glory of old age and recollection, the last of the great days. Stage 1 of Everywhere at the End of Time starts off musical, happy, and pretty much simple. Kirby lays down repetitious loops of generally warm and happy showroom tunes and relaxing piano selections to get you situated, get comfy, and make you feel at home. The beginning is quaint and peaceful, however, the textures are a plenty to really make it feel like you are connected with a person of the past, a chance for you to run through the brightest moments of their life. Kirby sautés a delicate amount of warping and cracking as he feeds the sound through a heavy coat of reverb to give you an unbelievably thick and smoky veil for the tunes dancing and swaying in your ears. Stage 1 is a very inviting listen. The first 40 or so minutes of the project, even a good chunk of Stage 2 that we'll get into shortly, understand what losing your memory may feel like. Kirby states that when work began on this series, it was difficult to predict how the music would unravel itself. Dementia is an emotive subject for many, and always a subject I've treated with maximum respect. According to Kirby's description for stage one, we know exactly where we are and what's going to happen. This is it for our subject, the last hurrah, the last chance to remember the good times, the happy moments, the first kiss, the honeymoon, the night out at the ballroom. Stage one opens up with a describing of Al Gorey and Sid Phillips' heartaches, the perfect beginning to this full journey. It's a silencing introduction that plays perfectly with the idea that you are in this for the long haul, and everything else that follows in stage one just adds to the overdose of this beauty. Kirby just spoon feeds you happy memories. I feel as if I'm sitting next to my grandparents, hearing them tell me stories of their past. My grandfather's time in the Navy with Track B3, quiet internal rebellions. I picture him sailing the Mediterranean Sea, wondering when he'll see his family next. My grandmother's experience when she arrived in the States from Italy, Track A6, things that are beautiful and transient, must have been what it felt like to see the Statue of Liberty for the first time. Although the music may start off rich and full of pride, there is a clear contradiction with what we are seeing in some of the track titles. You can't help but sense that time is running out and you're being rushed. How many happy memories can you fit before the remembering begins to rip? It's just a burning memory. We don't have many days. Quiet internal rebellions. Tracks like The Loves of My Entire Life, when they end abruptly, can send a chill down your spine. You really cozy up to the constant looping, as if these tracks or memories can last forever, only for them to just stop and echo away. Each track or memory destined to being ripped out like a page in a book. All types of dementia are progressive. This means that the structure and chemistry of the brain become increasingly damaged over time. The artwork for stage one presents a roll of papers, or maybe a newspaper, unfolding at the end. While the core of the roll stays intact, upright, and chest out, we see that the ends of the paper are already beginning to unravel, and show some slight wear. This roll of papers, strong at the body but weak at the ends, all perfectly replicate the slight imperfections that are slowly developing underneath the warm and cozy sounds of stage one. Although these 12 introductory tracks of Everywhere at the End of Time are beautiful and coherent, you can tell something is already beginning to unfold for the worse under the slight cracks and pops. But just how worse can it get? Stereotypical oldness, I believe, is the best way to summarize the colors used in the artwork for stage one. Old photos in our social studies textbooks from elementary school having us believe that the past was constantly coated with a rich and heavy color palette, images giving off the idea that if you were alive back then, there was some sort of filter over your vision that painted everything in these three colors alone. A dusty blue found in the accents of a uniform in a Babe Ruth era baseball game, muted greens on a dormant old tube TV, and a gentle gray seen in smiling snapshot from a time long ago, all exfoliate our mind with comfort, tranquility, and warmth. Colors that warp you straight into your grandparents' house, those shelves that have held the same objects for decades that you don't understand how they haven't collapsed yet. Just like the sounds present on stage one, the colors are clearly historic and directly relatable to another time. It's as if I'm suddenly craving a hot dog from Ebbets Field. One of my favorite things surrounding the lore of the sources for Everywhere at the End of Time is the unexplored imagery. Obviously, the earlier stages in the project have more structure, healthier bones, and upfront samples that can be heard more clearly, causing the early stages of the project to have most, and in certain cases all, of its original samples discovered. As we dive deeper into Everywhere at the End of Time, things get a bit more complicated, to put it lightly. When tracks in the early stages can consist of one jolly old sample, stages 5 and 6 present absolutely crazy ones.
With 6.5 hours of material throughout 6 stages in the project, the caretaker has ultimately created a scavenger hunt for lost media fanatics. Hey guys, Gordon Coach here, and today I'll be covering the lost media aspect of Everywhere at the End of Time. We've seen it time and time again. Artists and producers sampling other people's music in their works. A We have seen producers just grab a single measure of a track, throw some drums behind it, and create hip-hop classics. And on the other hand, we've seen artists simply dissect a sample and meticulously place each microsample into a sound that spawns a creation completely detached from the previous source material. With Everywhere at the End of Time, we get the best of both worlds. While the project starts off pretty straightforward with the samples, later sections of the project begin to smash multiple samples into one another and create this hazy, cloudy, thick audio configuration. Because of this, many of the samples are extremely hard to point out, making a chunk of the works unidentifiable. Fans have become fascinated at the idea of 100% completing the sample hunt across the entirety of Everywhere at the End of Time. Stages 5 and 6 being, of course, the most difficult of the bunch to figure out. James Leyland Kirby has so many different ways of hiding these samples. An example of this is when he has certain samples spawn in the left audio channel, while others could spawn in the right. An intense moment of this can be found in section A of the track K1 Advanced Class Entanglement on page 5, where multiple samples hit you from various directions. Because James Leyland Kirby is known to reuse many samples from his previous works, many of the now identified samples were first spotted by longtime fans, who noticed familiar sounds to past projects, swearing they've heard these little bites of audio on a track before, only to realize that the sample in question was also used on an earlier release in his discography, and many times, those same samples on earlier Kirby projects are already identified due to them being way more clear and upfront than how the same sample or sound is used in Everywhere at the End of Time. All in all, if you're a fan of lost media and a fan of music, Everywhere at the End of Time is a mountain to climb and chisel away at. Come on down and join the hunt.
There is an incredible document that I have used numerous times for my research for this video, created by Mr. Mister, who will be joining us later on in this video to go deeper into the whole sample hunt. As for stage 1, its final missing sample was discovered on December 11th, 2020, causing Everywhere at the End of Time stage 1 to be 100% solved. We will spend a whole section of this video diving into the fascinating sample hunt as Mr. Mister will be joining us to share the journey they and many others have been on to craft the entirety of the Everywhere at the End of Time sample hunt. Released on September 22nd, 2016, Stage 1's 12 tracks, separated as A1 through A6 and B1 through B6, are the most delicate and happening in the life of the caretaker. Although the tracks slightly give off a sense of thread and feel the show's title, the earliest recognition that something isn't quite clicking like it used to, there is a positive mood to the first 40 or so minutes of Everywhere at the End of Time. But how many memories, distant stories, and recollections of the good times can we squeeze in before we can't remember? Really quick before we continue this video, I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has supported me by becoming a patron of mine on Patreon these past couple of months. Many of you know, if you've been around here for a while, it is my dream to be able to do this channel as a full-time thing. I'll never stop working towards achieving that goal, and without a doubt, the support on Patreon has been the major factor in getting me that much closer. If you're interested in further supporting what I do, as well as getting a bunch of exclusive content like access to our patron-only Discord server Club Chennington, head on over and it is more than all good. The simple fact that you are taking the time out of your life to watch something I've created will always be mind-blowing to me, and I am so grateful for you just spending some time here with me today. Cheers, and let's get on with the video. It all started when I paid for a visit. I had a small chunk of time one day, and knowing I would be passing by the neighborhood at some point throughout my errand, I thought it would be nice to stop by and see how they were doing, if they needed anything or whatnot. After I got over graduated college and began indulging myself in new projects or hobbies whenever I wasn't at work, I found I always was in a rush when visiting them. I mean, with a billion things to do throughout my day, how could I not be? Right? I don't know. I guess that's just what happens as you get older. Your mind is constantly focused on your endeavors, and the value of paying a visit isn't a top priority much. And we've all heard that same story before from people older than us. Don't take for granted the time you have with loved ones older than you, but we all never listen. So I walked inside, did the usual hello. Do you need me to pick anything up for you? From the supermarket. blah blah blah, all the same. That same mundane checklist I go through every time I pay them a visit. And looking back at it all, it was really terrible of me. I mean, I wasn't mean or nasty to her. I just always felt, at the time, I had more important things to do. And deep down, I always felt like I was just trying to be in and out. I guess I was never truly there. But my grandmother, on the other hand, she relished these simple moments. She would always be so happy to see me. Glasses bigger than a goddamn head, and the pounds of jewelry she had on, even though it was just us sitting for a half an hour or so with some coffee in her kitchen, it always looked like she was like, going to a wedding. Stage 2. The second stage is the self realization and awareness that something is wrong, with a refusal to accept that. More effort is made to remember so memories can be more long form, with a little more deterioration in quality. The overall personal mood is generally lower than the first stage and at a point before confusion starts setting in. Back in stage 1, we saw hints of something beginning to go astray through the track titles. In stage 2, hints turned to more of a slap in the face. In stage 1, we saw song titles such as Things That Are Beautiful and Transient, The Loves of My Entire Life, and Into Each Other's Eyes. In stage 2, the caretaker begins to reveal itself a bit more. Once we get going into the first track of stage 2, A Losing Battle is Raging, there is this almost vacuum-like sound constantly galloping as it parasitically consumes the sample selections that were once fully coherent in stage 1. A losing battle is raging, surrendering to despair, last moments of pure recall. There isn't one piece of work here that seems hopeful or carefree at all. Something horrible is brewing. But as mentioned earlier, there's still a sense of some sort of musical pleasure here. Yeah, it's a bit sadder in its resonance, but we still get the swinging and swaying of these old musical fragments, horns, pianos, and strings that sound like the smell of mothballs. Seriously, I hate to get off like the serious train for a moment, but goddamn Kirby, you are pinpoint accurate with these sample choices. The texture of these tracks, the work Kirby surgically performed on them, make them seem so delicate yet so thick and smoky. One touch, and the whole thing will poof into a pile of dust. Released on April 5th, 2017, Stage 2 is also worded or categorized like Stage 1, C1 through C5, and then D1 through D5. Both stages showcasing a coherent mind with the ability to organize and archive. Multiple samples from Paul Whiteman and Chester Gaylord can be found throughout this section of Everywhere at the End of Time. This stage also has had all of its samples 100% discovered as of July 3rd, 2020, with not too much of a change from stage 1 in regards to production on Kirby's end. One thing
Oh
you will
man, we're
notice,
done
however,
with
is
this big
games
ass
allow
room.
rematch to play out in stage 2 far more than
I'm
in
not
stage
completely done,
1.
just,
While
got
stage
the
1 saw
fragment
him
of it.
repeating the most euphoric moments of these samples to seemingly infinity, stage 2 doesn't focus on just the highs of the original sample material. These samples are chewed on as well, certain sections just dropped out and scrapped to give off the feeling that the memories are seriously beginning to crumble. We're given some flowers with stage 2, and while most times when flowers are given, we know that they are lush, bright, and happy, yeah, that's not the case here. The abstract flower pot Ivan Seal painted almost looks like a skeleton, the skin, fat, and other layers burning away as the bare minimum begins to reveal itself. Ivan Seal's portrayal of decay is obvious here, but so too with the colors. A blanket your grandmother knitted for you long ago that is slowly but surely unwinding with each passing year. Even though she told you to never put it in the wash, you have done so a couple of times by accident. So that once bubblegum pink color is now a shell of what it used to be. Rusting cans and ancient tins that probably have a sewing kit inside, and a mustardy, less aesthetically pleasing olive color that would smell like army gear in a weathered battlefield. Similar to Stage 1, Stage two's color palette still feels strikingly old and historic, but a tad more grim than what we saw in Stage 1. While Stage 1 felt like a photo album of better days, a charming nostalgia, Stage 2 is a bit more tangible. Its colors are reminiscent of fabrics, materials, and textures of aged objects, a tough realization of what happens to things under the clutches of Father Time and Mother Nature. A good chunk of people who listen to Everywhere at the End of Time find their favorite moments to be Stage 1 and Stage 2. This introductory section of the project is just gorgeous in texture. They're full of richness and history. beeping drones that sprinkle our souls with a sense of comfort. It's a visit to the ballroom during its peak hours and the closest we'll ever get to what our grandparents refer to as the good old days. It's an incredibly inviting listen, and powerful in a good way. So yeah, okay, so my grandmother and I were sitting in the kitchen, and one thing my grandmother about her is that she loved doing these like latch hook art kits. I don't even know what to really call them. They're like stitch art or something. Yeah, whatever they're called. She would get these art books that were just full of them with these little templates, and she'd just sew through the numbers and just to crank out these nature scenes or flowers or dogs and cats with like little hats on or something, and she'd hang them all over the house. So I'm sitting there at the kitchen table as she's watching the espresso over the stove, and I'm just kind of looking around her kitchen, kind of soaking in all these latch hook art pieces framed on the walls that she's done over the years that I've seen my whole life, ever since I visited her with my parents as a kid, but they kind of just blended into her wall after knowing they were there for so many years. But it was at this moment that I felt like I was actually looking at them for the first time. And I mean, it was nothing crazy to make. You know, you just follow the pattern you're given until you filled out the template. But there was such a pure innocence to it that at that moment, it just made the significance of my errands seem so stupid and worthless. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was the first time in a long time when visiting my grandparents that my mind seemed to just turn off and actually soak in what I was supposed to be there for, spending some time with them. And I was pretty lucky to be in my 20s and still have both sets of grandparents at this point, you know, alive and fully intact. And I got this really weird feeling at that moment that she's going to pass away at some point, obviously. The chance for me to soak in everything about her, all the stories that she may have not been able to tell me, or maybe she did tell me them at one point, but I just wasn't paying attention, would end up be, you know, forever locked away in a coffin. And I hate to sound grim, but this is what I was thinking at the time. I then turned to her after scanning through the countless amounts of these latch hook art pieces she had suffocating the wall, and I asked her, "Can you make me one of these?" And she just looked back so happy and said, "Of course I would." Stage 3. Here we are presented with some of the last coherent memories before confusion fully rolls in and the gray mists form and fade away. Finest moments have been remembered. The musical flow in places is more confused and tangled. As we progress, some singular memories become more disturbed, isolated, broken, and distant. These are the last embers of awareness before we enter the post-awareness stages. Stage 3 is known for being the last moments of our subject coming to terms with recognizing they have an issue going on inside of them. One thing you'll notice about everywhere at the end of time is that the length of the tracks become longer and longer as you venture deeper into the work. So even though the entirety of the 6 stages add up to about 6.5 hours of material, stage 3 just begins over an hour into the timeline of it all. Sample choices and loops are still recognizable, but slowly beginning to crumble. Instruments get whatever notes out that they shoot for, but are way weaker and noticeably more abrupt than the calm and rich presence we were graced with in stage 1. Everything feels sort of rushed, like a house is burning down and you're grabbing whatever objects or heirlooms you can before it's too late. Except replace those objects with memories and a house with a brain. Songs have these bellowing clicks and thumping sounds on the low end of the mix. There is a presence lurking behind what the songs want us to hear, see, and feel. Some songs take a little bit to start up, as if the samples and instruments are tired and in need of catching their breath. The thick and cloudy feel I've mentioned present in part 1 and 2 of the work seems to have been completely popped, like a bubble, with textures scattering in all different directions throughout your headphones. Stage 3 just feels very confusing. Instruments all hanging off the edge of a cliff, trying to climb over one another to safety. But they know now their world is inevitably tipping over. The chop job Kirby puts on, and I don't say that in a degrading way at all, is so full and commemorable. There is a serious attention to detail in this work that sets it apart from other audio collages out there, Everything is done for a reason, and it's all backed up by the chilling subject matter Kirby wishes to share with us. As of the making of this video, at this exact moment I recorded this audio, only one sample remains to be found for Stage 3, F1 Gradations of Arm's Length. Everything else has been discovered for the rest of the material in this section, so as of right now, Stage 3 does indeed remain incomplete. Maybe you'll be the one to figure it out. Go give it a shot when you can. And for the samples that are found, it is incredible going to look some of them up and comparing the originals with what Kirby ultimately did to them. F3 Internal Bewildered World takes a tune called Miserere, or Mercy, from the opera Il Trovatore. In this act, Kirby grabs the sample like dough and kneads it, expanding it larger and larger. Its growth in volume and atmosphere is horrifying. F8, Mournful Camaraderie, that heartache theme, nothing more than a hand sticking out for you to grab in the smoky, scattered mess we found ourselves in. The sample is just begging for you to hold on to it, attempting to squeeze through only for it to abruptly come to a halt right before the explosive start of Stage 4. The artwork for Stage 3, once again, provides a stellar visual representation of the sound present in this moment of Everywhere at the End of Time. Here we have what seems to be a plant, at least to me, exploding at the ends. Everything that was once held or is just now destroyed and it has nowhere to go. These memories that rested safe within the boundaries of your mind for years and years are now moving in directions beyond comprehension. We just can't fathom what it would be like to accept the mind running out of gas. And the artwork here details that beautifully. A plant does not look like this. Gravity should be holding down those leaves or whatever those things are that are snapping and lashing out all over the place.
Oops.
400 meters. 200 meters.
Dude, they're making a new one?
Meg 2, The Trash. Rated PG-13. Only in theaters August
A new
4th.
Meg?
400 meters. 200 meters. 100 meters. Meg 2, The Trash. Rated PG-13. Only
Leaves or whatever those things are that are snapping and lashing out all over the place. I mean, I don't even know what to call this. Is it a pot of roses? Spinach? Like, there's no answer, and that is the whole point of this. There is no answer, at least for the common mind that can think. While Stage 1 and Stage 2 have us dreaming of the past, Stage
It's
3
almost
is our
3 o'clock.
subject waking up in a cold hospital bed, a reminder of the present. The most erratic and chaotic composition in the entire series, Seal explodes with vile greens on a blue background, a blue whose personality matches the same cold, worrisome blue of a doctor's garments. This is the first time in the series we are presented with an abstract composition instead of recognizable and clearly distinctive objects like we saw in Stage 1 and Stage 2. And yeah, I know Stage 2 might not be exactly a real object, but you can tell what it is. And Stage 3's color selection as well just adds on to this change to a more abstract composition with a far more hearty, vivid, and sort of disgusting, outer worldly color palette. Harsh black tones that signify a rotting state, chemical and nuclear greens being the numerous amounts of pills and medications you are required to swallow, and that ominous, distant blue that can send chills down anyone's spine. These colors are vomiting out of this unidentifiable situation. Like I've said already, I'm not sure if it's a plant that has exploded or something, but whatever it is seems to be untamable. Our situation has hit a breaking point, beyond the breaking point, and it's up to the doctors to get it all back under control. But as we all know, that is never a guarantee. Between the releases of Stage 3 and Stage 4, the caretaker would release Take Care, It's a Desert Out There, a 48-minute long track from the caretaker, all done in memory of and for the writer Mark Fisher, who passed away earlier in that year. The release is far more minimal than what we were seeing from the caretaker at the time. a departure from the auditory progression of everywhere at the end of time. This quest into cavernous sounds feels like one gigantic sweeping drum. Ever since he wrote the extensive liner notes for the Caretaker's theoretically pure and Terrorgrade Amnesia box set in 2005, Mark Fisher was instrumental in contextualizing the complex, abstract nature of the Caretaker's music to beguiled listeners across the world. The Caretaker's work, including this billion new long form piece, has always resonated with and fed into Fisher's ideas, so we could hardly think of a more fitting send-off for Leland Kirby's cherished vessel. On December 8th of 2017, James Leland Kirby and Ivan Seal would hold a live performance at the Barbican in London. At this event, titled Unsound This Location, James would give out 1,800 copies of Take Care, It's a Desert Out There to the audience members for free, while 350 signed copies were sold out by Boomcat, an independent online record store that has held a home for many of Leland Kirby's releases in physical form. Unfortunately, there is no official footage of the performance, and all that exists currently is an incomplete two-part recording with pretty bad quality, and there are some snippets of higher quality footage on Instagram that you can find. At the performance, Kirby and Seal would share the stage, sitting in leather armchairs with some whiskey in front of the visual display accompanied by the music. Something interesting to note, however, is that segments of the performance contain songs used later again in stages of Everywhere at the End of Time, specifically stage 5. And furthermore, the artwork for Take Care, It's a Desert Out There is almost virtually identical or in the same plane as the artwork for stage 5 as well. The visuals on screen flash us through visual states and fixations as a camera pans through a mansioned house, distorted by corrupting images that blink across the screen. The piece is centered upon misremembering, how the deep space of dementia starts to eat into our thoughts and break apart any grip on reality. So, about a week after I asked my grandmother to make me one of these art pieces, I went back to her house. My grandmother and I decided I would take her to the craft store down the road and let her grab whatever supplies she needed to make this thing a reality. I knew I wanted her to make me something music related. I didn't want to, fully tell her what to do, but kind of just give her some sort of ballpark, I guess. And I swear, I cannot be the only one who thinks this, but grandparents must have some sort of protocol set in place every time you ring that doorbell. They are always ready to go in position. Every time I, ring the bell, door would open, boom. I'm hit with the smell of espresso brewing on the stove. My grandfather slumped in the background on his couch, watching the latest Inter Milan game or the Italian news. You know, I really feel like it was a stage, and every time I just ring the doorbell, they would go into character. So my grandmother and I, we flipped through all the old books of designs she gathered over the decades of doing this stuff, eventually landing on a page that we both knew right away would be the one. It was a portrait of an angel floating in the clouds, playing this guitar, violin looking thing. It had this beautiful ribbon flowing through all of the elements in the piece, a ribbon that the book said to make pink, but I remember my grandmother saying she'd want to do it in gold as it would pop out a little bit better. She was really excited and started setting up the little workstation as if she wanted to tell me, leave so she can get right to work. So I took down that espresso like swallowing a pill and shortly made my way to my car. And that's when that dreadful feeling started to hit me again. I knew deep down I was doing this as a way to have something to remember my grandmother by once she would eventually pass away. This token to maybe remind myself that, hey, look, you did this thing, you made her happy, and you spent time with her. But it kind of, in the end, at least to me, it felt like I was just doing something for myself, just to have this like object, once the time passed and she wasn't here anymore. And I just felt selfish. I felt really selfish. 2 weeks later, I went back after kind of forgetting about it being made, and it was done. And let me tell you, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
Everywhere at the end of time is a unique experience. I'd go as far as say it's a powerful journey.
When I first listened to this, I was going through some immense changes in my life, and it was a really difficult time for me. I was thinking about the happy memories that I've had. You're happy that you've had them, but at the same time, you're sad that it's gone. It's like you're nostalgic, but you're also melancholic. Those days are behind you. The people are leaving. Everything is slowly going away. And in the end, it's becoming nothing more than faint memories. And you have to come to grips with that. It doesn't take long for that melancholy to turn into fear. In the beginning, it was a floating sensation, but now you're falling. You're falling into a bottomless pit. Whatever you still have is slipping away from your own grip.
Stage 4. Post awareness stage 4 is where serenity and the ability to recall singular memories gives way to confusion and horror. It's the beginning of an eventual process where all memories begin to become more fluid through entanglements, repetition, and rupture. Stage 4 is when hell finally becomes a reality. The last second of stage 3 and the first second of stage 4 are two worlds apart. The caretaker slicing away everything we've been hearing with only the sharpest of knives in one diabolical cut. Everything we were feeling for 2 hours is just gone in an instant. Instead of hyper descriptive song names sprinkled with the charms of historical context and blissful memories, we're now in a heavily structured system of procedures and protocols. Every track from